is 6 o'clock. I like to honor everyone's time. Um, we have about 49 participants, so I'm going to go ahead just to say welcome and do some introductions and turn the floor over to our facilitator for this evening, who I believe is here. There you are. Okay. So hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. First of all, thank you so very much for committing to these number of meetings that we have between now and the end of this calendar year, 2020. Thank you for the time that you're spending with us, for sharing your expertise and also your voice. So I definitely wanted to start off with the thank you. I'm going to turn the floor over to the facilitator that we are working with. Her name is Sylvia Flowers. We've worked a few times with the ALMA advisory group. They have done amazing work with us internally, with our administrative team. And I thought based on the amount of voices and just coordinating the entire process, having folk that are trained facilitators would be the way to go for this meeting. I would also like to thank as well members of our core team. So that is Amanda Siegfried, myself, and also two members of the Board of Education. Kisa Boy, I know is here. Kisa, would you like to say a few words to the group before I turn the floor over to Sylvia?
Sure. I think you said it very well. We're so thankful to all of the parents in the community who have volunteered their time to help us build a really strong plan. And the planning of these meetings is really to put community input and feedback at the center. So we're excited to kick off this meeting.
Very good. Amanda, did you have anything that you wanted to say to the group before I turn it over to Sylvia?
No, I just echo both of you. Thank you so much for your time and all of the expertise that you bring to the table.
Very good. Just in terms of the logistics, your calendar invites, if you did not see that or receive it, please let me know. But hopefully everyone received their calendar invite. And if you open it, you will see some of the attachments, which if you didn't get a chance to read it before this evening, don't worry, but there is some background information that's provided to you. And we'll continue to use the calendar invites to share out information, resources for our meetings. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the floor over to our facilitator for this evening, Sylvia Flowers. Sylvia, take it away.
Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me okay? Nods? Yes, thank you. As Dr. Kelly mentioned, my name is Sylvia Flowers. I am a consultant with the ALMA Advisory Group. And the ALMA team has spent some time with the board in the past, and we are excited to partner with you again for the next month or so as you all work through your hybrid reopening plan. In your meeting invite, you should have a copy of the agenda, as well as hopefully everyone has done their pre-reading and refresh themselves with the details of the plan. We also have a presentation that we can use for our time together. But I just want to quickly, Amanda, are you gonna pull up the PowerPoint as co-host?
Sure, I'll go ahead and I have it up right now, so I can share my screen.
Great.
While Amanda's doing that, Carrie or Amanda, for the people that are here, just so that we can keep attendance, would you mind, or we're going to do that later, just putting their names in the chat, Sylvia? So if you wouldn't mind just going to the chat and just putting your first and last name, your role, school that you represent, just so that we have a record of who's here or not. It looks like most of you are here, but the number of participants do not equal the number of invites that went out. So I just want to make sure that we have that on record.
It doesn't look like we can do the chat except for privately right now.
Okay, so if one of the hosts could open up the the chat just so people can put in their name. Roll.
You should all be good now.
Thanks, Michael.
Great. If you would go to slide 2, Amanda. So just to recap, here's our agenda for today. And we're going to spend some time together. This first portion will be some whole group time. And then our last hour will really be some time to dig into some specific breakout group discussions and to learn a little bit more on a topical area about what is most concerning to this group and what are some ways that we can think about the possibilities as we think about reopening. On the next slide, and just to pause, does this feel like an adequate use of our time? And does this seem like we will have enough time to get through everything on the agenda? Be looking at the chat at the same time. Next slide, Amanda. All right, so just to cover a few housekeeping things. One, this meeting is going to be recorded. We are going to hopefully spend 2 hours together today. The lines will be muted unless you are speaking. And if you would like to speak, we would prefer that you use the raise hand button so that we are able to adequately hear everyone and get everyone's comments as needed. You can also use the chat feature if you want to chat a question or a comment into the group. And I'll be monitoring the chat as well as some of my other fabulous co-hosts. A lot of you have your first and last name in your profile, so that is awesome. And just for the good of the group, when you are speaking, please introduce yourself and your role before you give any comments. And then, of course, we would also love to hear or to see your face, if at all possible, but understand that folks might be multitasking as needed. Next slide. All right, you all may have received and had a chance to select a breakout group. If you have not done that yet or not been assigned to a group that you know of, please rename your profile name to include the number of the group that you would like to join. So for example, if you're interested in the safety, medical, and health group, then type the number 5 and your name, first and last name, in your profile so that we know which group you want to be assigned to. And Amanda's actually going to be in community engagement. All right. So again, if you have not selected your group, please do so that we can be prepared for the second half of our meeting today. Next slide. All right. Well, Dr. Kelly kicked us off with welcome already, and folks have done a chat introduction to tell us who's in this virtual space, but wanted everyone to reflect on the list of panel members. And if we could ask ourselves, do we have the appropriate voices as part of this group? And if we don't, what voices are missing? And I would love for for this group to think about that and either chat or raise their hands to let us know if there are folks that we have not included, either from our parent community, community organizations, students or teachers. I'm seeing student voice, and I'm going to be taking some notes. Student voice, custodial staff. OP residents. Always more teachers. This is great. I think we had some conversations about students, office staff, SPED teachers, teacher assistants, this is great. So I captured students, which we certainly brainstormed how we could include student voice in this process. Custodial staff, OP residents, always more teachers, office staff, special education teachers, teacher assistants, someone from the high school transition team, staff who are currently part of the Stage 2 hybrid team, Oak Park Health Department, public health officials. So I am keeping track of some of these suggestions. Luncheon, food service. And when we look at our objectives on the next slide, we'll see the first objective is to ensure that additional parent and community input is reflected in the hybrid learning plan. And so we've certainly listed a lot of additional voices that we need to hear from. And as we go through our agenda today and as we break out into our breakout sessions, we want you all to think about how we can engage some of these groups that you all have mentioned here in the chat and how we can get feedback from those groups as we do our work over this next month. So that may not mean that they are part of this panel, but this panel will be charged with getting that additional input. Our second objective is to reflect on the current hybrid learning plan and identify areas for further clarification and input. And as we move through this process, we want to make recommendations to the superintendent, the Board of Education, and the leadership team to refine the draft hybrid learning plan and present that revised hybrid learning plan to the Board of Education in the December meeting on first and second reading for approval. Doctors, we have a lot of doctors on this panel as parents and parents and medical professionals. And we are excited to have their input with the multiple hats that they wear. I put the first two bullets in bold because that's primarily the focus of this first meeting. And so today's meeting, we're really focused on how do we get the additional parent and community input to be reflected in our recommendations, and then two, to really think about and reflect on where are the opportunities for further clarification, for refinement, for improvement, based on what you know so far? How does this sound to the group? And are there any questions, comments, additional thoughts about the charge of this panel? Yellow community. Feel free to unmute yourself if you have a comment, or you can continue to use the chat.
Hello, Ms. Flowers. My name is Faith Cole. I'm the director of MTSS for the district. I also have a sixth grader at Julian Middle School, so I serve in a couple different roles. When I look at this, I wonder too, is there a way to kind of embed how, once we move forward with our hybrid plan, how we would kind of modify and tweak it according to kind of the feedback from the community, and not necessarily the, maybe the final plan, but also as we move forward in implementing the plan. Is there a way to kind of embed that in some of our work?
So the opportunity for the plan to be revised once it goes live, like how do we incorporate?
How do we seek feedback? How do we kind of, yes. And if anything, what does that change look like? Sometimes it's good to kind of set up expectations so that we're making sure that we're following through on our end, but families also know too that this is how we're going to move forward with making modifications. Thank you.
Yes, I think we're all learning in this environment how to be flexible and the need to be flexible, and that sometimes what is written down the first time might need to be erased and scrapped or changed, modified as we go forward. All right. So let's spend some time, the next 15 minutes, thinking about our norms and commitments. And if you want to go to the next slide, I would love for either Dr. Kelly or Ms. Broy, board president, to talk about the norms and commitments that you all use that guide and facilitate your work, and then open that up to our larger panel to reflect.
Dr. Kelly, do you want me to take the lead on the norms, or would you want to do it together? How do you do it?
You could take the lead. I honestly would have to, I'm sorry, Sylvia, would have to call in Carrie because she's like really our go-to person. But I think most of the norms that you have here are the norms that we use internally, the equity of voice in particular, but also we really have a norm around the start on time, end on time. Carrie, like other things that you can think of, definitely the brevity, discipline, thought.
Yeah, these are all board norms that were established at our board retreat. I'll just quickly go through them, and then we have some people who are adding additional ones. Equity of voice, just making sure that everyone has an opportunity to speak. Brevity, right? Like thinking about your thoughts and then being as concise as possible, just because we do have a large group of individuals here. Disciplined thought is just, trying to keep the conversation going in a way that's like momentum forward in thinking about what you're going to say in advance. Preparation, hopefully we've read the materials, the pre-reading materials, and just coming to the table with the foundation being laid. Authentic, genuine conversations, people feeling like they have the opportunity to speak their truth. Also being mindful of just the next one, respectful tone and intent, right, to be genuine, but also speak to others with respect and with an intent to be respectful. Listening, which is, I don't know, this is not rank ordered, but I think listening probably, for me anyway, is at the top. It's just kind of, pausing and listening to what people say and not trying to form a question before they've finished, and to be thoughtful about that. And then finally, assume positive intent. And we're all here, 6 o'clock, the Thursday night. So we're all here with a purpose. And so even if someone says something that doesn't feel or doesn't land right, try to assume that they wouldn't be here if they didn't care about the same things that you do. And so assume positive intent. And so that's my reading of it, is how we kind of interpret these at the board table.
Thank you so much. My personal favorite is assume positive intent. I think we are all here because we care about our community, we care about our families and our students, and we want to make sure that everyone is safe and healthy as they return to school. And I just love that one personally and professionally. There are a couple of other ones that were noted in the chat. There's one says step up and step back. And Markeisha, do you mind telling us what that means a bit?
Everyone. Sure. So that's really intended to have everyone engage, but to be mindful of how much you are engaging. So ensure that you're giving voice to others.
So is that similar to equity of voice or a bit different?
It's similar, but I think it's more direct.
Got it. Humanity over expediency. Do you want to say more about that one? I'm taking notes to see.
Sure. So, I think sometimes you have to allow folks to tell their truth and give them the opportunity and space to do that. And just remember that voice matters, particularly of folks that have been harmed or those that we need to center our attention around.
Okay. I will update this list and share it, have it ready to share for next time. Are there additional thoughts?
There looks like there are a couple more in the
Yeah.
chat after.
Be open to changing your opinion.
I also see check your power.
Check
and
your power.
constructivist listening. Who said that? Nichelle Stigger said constructivist listening.
Michelle, do you mind if I call on you to explain constructivist listening for the good of the group?
Absolutely. I apologize, my son's got the cartoons in the back, but you really are listening to learn and not to answer or respond. And so a lot of times in spaces like this, we're looking to respond and be able to tell what we feel at that moment, but we're not allowing others to speak so that we then in turn receive their knowledge. So it really is taking, it's a taking a step back while someone is listening.
Got it. Thank you. And then Carrie, you put in the chat watching for othering.
Yeah, I think just, I acknowledge we're living in a global pandemic, and folks' nerves are frayed, right? And sometimes when our nerves are frayed, we're not totally checked in to our social emotional core competencies. And sometimes when that happens, I don't know if you've seen the meme of like the different Spider-Mans pointing at each other. It can become sort of this, an exercise in trying to pinpoint where the blame is or who owns all the mistakes or errors. And I think certainly, regardless of what community you spend a lot of time in, if you've spent any time in social media, it's just like an othering parade. So if we're going to show up here and spend our time and be the best versions of ourselves, I wonder, I know for me, I've got a Post-it note sitting out that says othering, and that's going to be like my kind of check with myself that I'm not working to not engage in that and be mindful.
We're going to talk a little bit. we're going to talk a little bit about our commitments to one another. And I'm going to take a few notes, but wondering what commitments we want to have to one another as we work through this process. As I mentioned, we are recording these sessions, so we do want to be able to share what the group is working on with the community, but would love some feedback on the use of social media before decisions have been made, from this group. Naming. Sorry, I'm backing up to Nichelle.
I'm sorry. It's so important that we don't have to spend time in a peace circle, but literally naming in space people who have done this work before us and naming any hurt that may have been done before we move forward. Because I think a lot of times we just need to acknowledge, like right now, this is ridiculous, but move on so that we can feel like we can move through that air. I think that's so important.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Flowers, this is Mary Beth Sheets. I'm the executive director of HEPZBA, and we provide day services on site in the school. So we are, I'm not a school employee, but I liked what you said about the use of social media. And it's something that I have struggled with. I think we all do in our careers and in our personal lives. That is that if something's talked about, that means that it's true.
Right.
And that is absolutely not the case. Because we had a conversation about something doesn't necessarily mean I agree with you. And because we had a conversation about something doesn't necessarily mean that that's our final decision and that's how we're moving forward. And so I think having a commitment to one another of letting this process play out and having our plan be reflected in our plan versus the process of how we had to get there and the conversations that we have to be able to feel like that's an appropriate and safe place to do it.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's important. And one of the reasons why I highlighted that we're really focused on the first two objectives for today's meeting. We are not making final decisions today. We are hoping to open up the conversation to the possibilities and what options are out there to create a hybrid plan that reflects the needs of parents, students, staff, and the community. So I definitely feel like people should feel comfortable in throwing out ideas, and that, that doesn't mean that idea is going to make it into the final plan yet. We are going to work through that process. I love what Gary said about the power of social media as well. Someone had suggested one of the objectives should be around transparency with the community about process, objectives, and outcomes. And, is social media the place to share that transparency, or by having these recordings publicly available for folks to view and reflect on later, they will have true insight into some of the conversations that have happened. What other commitments are you all wanting to see from this group? Another board that I serve on, they talk a lot about disagree, then commit. So we are aware that not everyone is going to be 100% happy with every decision. And we are going to disagree, and then we might have to commit to the plan that we are going to recommend. Getting to the serious talk. Andy, do you want to share? Say more about that?
Yeah, sure.
Or is that a prompt for me to move along? I don't know.
I think it's a prompt for us all to just get to it, because I know that there's a lot going on and there's a lot we're going to be talking about. And I know getting to the norms and making sure that we establish them correctly is definitely important. But I know like what we're talking about is a bigger issue that we gotta like get to. And I get it. We need to establish those norms, and I appreciate we're doing that. And I love the fact that, and I want everybody to feel comfortable just talking about what's going to be best for us, because it's all about that and what's going to be the best for the kids. But getting after it is truly what it's all about, and that's what I'm here for. And I hope that everybody's there too. And I know we got to stop sometimes and just talk it out, but yeah.
Got it. Commitment to have students at the center of our conversation. Is that a norm that we want to include, or a commitment?
Yes, even though we don't yet have them represented, I think when you lead from that space and really kind of recognize the student experience, I think the outgrowth of that will actually be productive for all of us. So just remembering that they're why we're here.
Great. Well, we're going to spend the next 30 minutes also listening. We want to hear in the whole group session what specifically from the original plan resonated with you, was concerning for you. What do we need to dig into? So this next section, next part of our agenda is really to hear in whole group what have been some of the concerns that either you personally have heard, or that you personally feel, or that you've heard from your friends, colleagues in the community. And so we want to take this time to hear from you. We know a lot was shared at the October board meeting, and we want this group to sort of wrestle with those things when we transition to the breakout sessions. So at this point, I want to open it up for feedback from our community and parents, as well as staff, about the original proposed plan.
If I can go, Sylvia, is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, I'm Stella. I teach at Man. I'm fourth grade teacher. When I read the plan, what really resonated was that even though remote learning will never, ever, ever take the place of in-person, we know that as professionals, what it resonated with me is that there would be days and several days that I would not see my students. And I think when I think about what my day is like now, I am touching base with all of my students. I have them in breakout rooms. I'm working with small group. I'm very often one-on-one with them. Even during asynchronous time, they know I'm available, just because I feel that's important. Because in class, I'm always there, and I'm trying very hard to replicate that as much as we can with remote. So that's the one thing that resonated with me, is that the plan doesn't allow for that one-on-one or small group, or just touching base with them on a social emotional level the way that I'm doing right now. Because number one, we would be social distancing, which now, as much as I'm really far away from them, I am still able to meet with them one-on-one in breakout rooms. And secondly, because there's X amount of days, depending on what day, if it's a Friday that they're there, there's many days, including the weekend, that I would not see a special group. And when I think, I see my kids, and when I think about so many kids in my class who are struggling with the connection that they feel that they're missing, being apart from them would be worse. And that's what resonated with me initially. Thanks, Sylvia.
You're welcome. The other part of this was to allow staff to sort of unpack some of the thinking behind the plan, and to clarify any misconceptions that might be out there as well. So if there are staff members who want to provide rationale as we hear some of the things that have been expressed, or either clarify what some of the constraints that they are working under, either through what ISB has put forward, this is also a good time to share that.
And then Sylvia, while you are recognizing those folk who are taking the mic, I will just point out things that are in the chat box. So Ebony Lofton wrote, it's important to recognize that there are inherent tensions present in any decision that is made. Ebony, I don't know if you want to espouse upon that.
Sure. I think it's really important to recognize, especially as kind of you're making decisions, that there are trade-offs. So for example, we'd love to maintain the integrity of the teacher-student relationship, but if we go to a hybrid model, that means that there's going to be an impact on how instruction is provided. So that would introduce some form of live streaming, in which we can start thinking about maybe, again, marginalizing remote learners. So I think there's always just this trade-off that exists between any decision that we make. We just need to kind of be clear going into it that there is no perfect decision, but we're trying to kind of make the best decision, the best worst decisions in some cases.
Yeah, and then I see again naming that trade-off. That was from Nichelle Stigger, and then Carrie Cam said, it is critical to understand opportunity costs with the planning. And I don't know if Carrie or Nichelle wanted to say more.
No.
And that's fine.
And that comment, does that feel true that teachers may not see their students for days? Is that part of the model?
I did not see it that way. I would, if there's anyone from the learning models team to kind of talk about the plan. So when students are not in person, they would receive instruction remotely. Ebony or Michael, would you be able to share more?
Sure. Michael, did you want to go ahead or do you want me to?
Go ahead.
So the way that the plan is currently set up in terms of group A and group B, obviously we split the classrooms in half to make sure that we're in alignment with our safety standards. So there would be 2 days with a particular classroom, half of a classroom, 2 days with another half of the classroom, and then obviously for those students who attend remotely. And then on a Friday, alternating Fridays with either the first half or the second half. So students would be present. It's just that different groups of students would be present on a daily basis.
Got it. Got it. What else was concerning, and what other feedback did you hear that we need to consider in this process?
I just want to make sure that we recognize, because we have some hands raised in
Right.
the.
I cannot see the hands raised.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if anyone could see, so I figured I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Awesome.
I don't know, I see a few, so I don't know if we want to start with Gabby.
Yes.
Hello, my name is Gabby Rosenblum. I am a music teacher at BI, and I am also the parent of an 8th grader at Julian. There's no easy answer to any of this. I appreciate all of the work that the various committees did to put this together. I was on a few of those committees this summer with Michael and some other folks to help add teacher voice to this. But looking at the plan, it is a huge shift. There is going to be a huge amount of upheaval, and it is the best plan we had with the constraints given, but schedules are going to change. Time with the students is going to change. The whole way everything is being taught. It's a huge change. And I feel like the benefits of such a restricted in-person model are outweighed, I guess, by all the upheaval that is going to be created. And I think that's, if I'm keeping this student-centered, how is being in person with so many restrictions a better situation when we're going to be changing everything for them? So it's really about balancing that out. And I have a student who desperately wanted to be in school in September. And when I asked her a few weeks ago, said, I want to stay remote. This is working. Now that's my personal situation, and it is different for every student and family. But again, does all of the change to go to this different model really help. So balancing those.
Yeah. Amanda, do we have other hands raised?
We do. Gary Fernando.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gary Fernando. I'm a parent of 2 children at Whittier. I think one of the things that I had heard a little bit, and again, this is something that I'm sure there are people who agree or disagree one way or the other, if we're talking about feedback of the original plan, is for the swing day on the hybrid model, instead of it being Friday, to be moved to Wednesday. And the reason for that would be that then students go 3 days in a row on or 3 days in a row off. You know, they don't have 2 days a week off 2 days and then go back another day. And the reason for that is trying to coordinate childcare and employment and job shifts and things of that sort. Whereas some people would say, okay, I know that I just have 3 days in a row where I have to have coverage for my childcare situation, rather than saying, okay, now I have a Monday, Tuesday, and then next week I have, you know, in other words, people who are in the Wednesday, Thursday group can always have that 3 day, whereas everyone in the Monday, Tuesday group will always have that kind of chop in their weeks where their kids are in school on Friday. And so to kind of just keep it as either a 3 day or 2 day swing in both ways might help families out a little bit. And I'm sure there are reasons to do it the other way too, but just something to consider.
Great, thank you.
I wanted to interject here. I feel like we also should probably just lay the foundation. I think the hybrid plan was for those parents who actually want hybrid. I don't think any of the plans that were put forward were requiring people to move away from remote. Is that correct, Dr. Kelly? Like, it wasn't everybody has to go hybrid. It was for those parents who want their kids in school.
Right.
Here's the plan. But if you want to stay remote, you can continue remote. Now, there might be some, like Ebony mentioned, live streaming that might be different, but the remote option has never been taken off the table for any parents. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, I just wanted to level set to let people know that it's not an either or, it's both.
And Dr. Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, that is a requirement from the state that you offer.
That is currently
both remote. Yeah.
Can I just say for the students only, that's a requirement.
Yeah.
So it is not a requirement, or rather the professionals don't get that choice. Yeah, there are a couple of chats and I'm not sure. I just want to give Christine Zelaya, because she wrote in a chat like that's not accurate, Christine. And then Makisha also wrote, have to ask, particularly if equity is at the center of decision making, what are the unintended consequences of this? So I'm not sure if it's something that we just said or from before.
No, that was from a while ago in terms of not seeing students for 3 days in a row. Every student would be seen either in person or remotely each day. And so I just wanted to, make sure that that misconception was clarified.
Thank you.
Great.
Yeah. Mac, were you referring to the hybrid plan, or was it something else?
Yeah, no, it was really just about the trade-offs, and just as we are thinking about the plan as it's been written, and as we continue to give feedback about it, I think we need to continue to ask our.
Okay, I think she just went on mute. She just went back on mute. Okay, she's off mute now.
Sorry, I don't know if you heard me. My comment really had to do more with trade-offs, so it was a while back.
All right, and then the same thing, Gabby or Emily agreed with Gabby that the 2.5 days a week does not seem like enough in-person time to make a difference. And I think that's what Ebony was talking about in terms of the trade-off. Amanda, you can call on the next person that has the hand up.
Stacy Gripe, I know you've had your hand raised for a while.
Hi, I'm Stacy Grief, and I'm an educator with By Discovery, and also I have a third grader at By School. I also agree with Gabby Rosenblum, and my kind of question and concern is with the half-day structure, and I'm not clear if that is a requirement to just have half-day. But being in the schools now and supporting e-learners in person, the kids are there full day. So my question was, is that half day a requirement? And is there a way to make it a full day? To sort of make it a little bit more worth the upheaval of everything that kids would actually have a full day.
Yep. So I don't know if Donna Middleton or Jim Hackett, your students are eating lunch, and how are they doing that?
So they eat in the classroom. So they take their masks off to eat. And we generally set a timer so that they're not taking a really long time to eat. We try to give them about 20 minutes, and then they change their mask, and we go outside. So as the weather's warm, they can finish eating outside if they haven't. I know that would be different in the winter time, but that's how we've been doing it.
And so just so I'm clear, Stacy, are you asking or wanting to know if instead of doing the half day and the students go home and continue their classes at home, could we look at a full day in the hybrid model? Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Got it. Okay.
Both for
There's no I think her question was there a requirement for a half day? And the answer is no requirement from the state for a half day. I think, and again, other people can correct me if I'm wrong, I think a part of it was based on the health and safety concern around eating lunch, the number of students in the gathering would have to be less than 50. And the amount of time that would take to cycle students through the lunchroom. And if they ate in the classroom, I think some of the concerns that were raised by the people that were on that safety team was around the students that have life-threatening allergies. And I think that there were concerns about the taking your mask off as well. And again, other folk would have to chime in on that. I'm not sure.
I just to follow up on that, and if the other anyone else who's providing childcare right now has anything to say about it, but the guidelines that I read and that we used to guide our program said, that schools, part of the rules for the schools were that the kids had to eat lunch in the classroom, so they're not moving throughout the building. So there would only be 15 kids like per space that are eating.
Got it.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you can also use, if that space, schools would be also eligible to use the cafeteria space, but you would have to have a certain number of students in that gathering. I think it's good just to note, and for people that are working on that team, they can kind of talk that through.
Yes.
But
That's what I
overcoming
was going to say. This is something that I think that particular subgroup can dig into. There's something about, are there other hands raised, Amanda, before I go to some of the comments?
I want to read Carrie Kim's comment though. Her children recently moved back to a hybrid model and all learners have been impacted, those who are in hybrid and those who are in remote. The demands on teachers and staff have shifted and there is an adjustment phase. Shilpa is raising her hand, but Amanda, is there someone before Shilpa?
I think Julie Dunn, and then we'll do Shilpa.
Hi, my name's Julie Dunn, and I'm a teacher at Whittier, and I'm also a mom of kids at Lincoln and Brooks. Thank you for inviting me tonight first. And I guess my big takeaway after reading the hybrid plan was, what were the benefits? Like, and I don't know, maybe it's required by the state to offer a different choice. I'm actually not sure of that. But I felt like as a teacher, I was afraid the negatives outweighed the positives in how effective I could be as a teacher. The transition that Gabby mentioned, all the change, even if you stay remote, you're with a new teacher most likely and some new students, and real relationships have been formed. So that's a big loss. And then once we are in the flow of hybrid and things are going well, I worry about the contact time with students and how, as one teacher, I would really effectively reach my kids on remote as well as in the classroom. Those felt like really difficult things, especially as remote is going well. And I feel like we are making gains and we've made a lot of progress. So I guess my big question was, are we sure all of this is really worth it in the end? Like after it's going well and things are moving along, will the benefits outweigh what we're doing in the moment? And as a parent, like Gary mentioned, the scheduling, the rescheduling of a difficult year adds a layer of stress as well. So that was it.
Got it. Shilpa?
Hi, I'm Shilpa Advani. I'm the school nurse at BI, and this is my first year after 10 years of being a D97 parent. My kids have moved on to the high school. So I think I kind of echo a bit of what Julie Dunn said and also what Gabby Rosenblum said, but I got an opportunity to work a lot with a social emotional learning committee since we formed a transition committee back in the spring. And it gave me a really good chance to look at the fact that because we're in a pandemic and this is scary with so many unknowns and no end to this, we have really learned so much about perseverance and teaching kids even more resiliency when we don't have these limits defined. And I feel like moving to hybrid, I've heard both in the school community and out as a parent in the community, what the moving to hybrid, at least the model that was proposed, feels like. Number one, transitions are already so hard for kids. So being in school for a 3-hour period, a couple days a week, and then restructuring of the classrooms after teachers have really worked super hard to build connections within their classrooms. They are differentiating in breakout rooms. There's tiered interventions, both academically and social emotionally, that are being delivered. And in a hybrid setting, those tiered interventions in person would be very difficult, in my opinion, because of space, because of distancing, because of the possibility of shaming children who are at different levels in a way that when we didn't have these restrictions and scare of a contagious spread of COVID, you could move closer to a child, you could give nonverbal cues. There's so many things that we could do in the past that we can't do now. So I think that's been felt and heard a lot in terms of what the hybrid model would bring, and including a lot of upheaval of some formed relationships and connections.
Thank you.
Amanda, before you call on the next hand, one of the questions, Sylvia, if you want to jot down, wondering of pulling out those 2 points made by the state and making them bold in the plan so that it is plain. That Nichelle Sticker said that.
Right. Which 2 points, Nichelle? Can you clarify?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember back, but I know there were some things that were required by the state that I think people may have glossed over that they thought was coming directly from the district, and clarifying what is district initiated and what is state initiated.
So were you referring to the fact that you have to offer the 2 options?
Correct. Yes.
Remote and hybrid.
Correct. And why?
And why? Yes. Got it.
So I just want to clarify, and don't like throw rocks at me or tomatoes. A district does not have to, I don't believe a district has to offer like an in-person. But if it does, then they have to offer the choice for parents to not send their kids back.
Thank you for that clarification. I think it's really important for all of us here to know kind of how all of that works.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
So yeah, district can be remote only, but if a district decides to do a blended or in-person, if a parent does not want to send their child back, they don't have to. We have to offer the remote.
Great.
Want to do the next hand up, Amanda?
Sure. Before we go to that, I'm just going through the chat. I didn't know if we had a couple of our physician / parents who.
Yep, I have the next on the chat. So the next one, if you want to, is by number 5, Ashima Gupta. Is there a possibility to do 2 weeks in person and 2 weeks remote, with the stipulation if you travel during the 2 weeks of remote, you must quarantine? Are we bound with the 2/3 day, half days a week? So I would say that a part of the group that's going to be looking at the learning models is to like reconsider.
Yeah.
The next one from Sarah Mendez. Sarah, you want to talk about this one? It's a staffing issue. We would need to staff supervision for all classes.
That was a while back, just in response to the lunch piece.
Okay.
I think there were definitely safety concerns, but I think the larger issue was the staffing issue, because we have a limited number that could even go to the cafeteria. So then you're talking about kids in their classrooms, and then the staffing on that is
right, because the staff members also are eligible for their lunch and also are eligible for their planning period.
Exactly.
So they would not be able to provide that supervision coverage in the classroom during the lunchtime. Some other comments in the chat if you guys want to look around lunch. Arnetta Thompson, as a parent, the ideal that remote students will get a new teacher is a concern. The consistency, the community relationship building, I think we've heard that one.
Yeah.
From others. Parents, herself included, very concerned about that change. As a teacher, huge concerns about lunch being a part of any hybrid model. So Arnetta, I don't know if you want to give like that voice, we'll give you the floor. So.
Well, I mean, I think it was already said, but the idea for supervision, the amount of time that students will be without a mask, I have a huge concern about that, and I have a huge concern with requiring someone else to supervise my students in that situation. As well, we're trying to minimize the amount of people who are interacting. And so if I'm on lunch or, unable to supervise my students, then that means another person has to come in and be exposed in that way. And I have huge concerns about that.
Okay. And I don't know if there are any other staff members who would agree with her. You could use the reactions and just do a thumbs up. And then we have a Dr.
Kelly, I just want to be mindful of time too. Do we stay at 7 o'clock? We were going into breakout sessions.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to at all thwart any of the conversation, just being a timekeeper, because we only have 2 hours.
Yeah. Definitely. I'm looking through the chat to see if there are any new comments and new reflections.
I think one of the doctors, I can't see the last name, Mary is the first name, about COVID not going away.
Oh, yeah, that's me. My name is Mary Borsani. So that was a comment just in response to, at the time somebody was talking, I'm sorry, I don't remember her name. And it was just a comment as part to remote learning is going very well for students. And I agree, remote learning is going well for some students. But the thought that just because remote learning is going well to not plan for in-person learning, that was all my comment was a response to. I mean, it's a long discussion, the medical aspect of COVID, and I'm happy to give an hour lecture about it as an ID physician, but I'm sure you guys don't want to hear that right now. But I think we all know we have a long way to go, and we need to figure out in-person learning. Thank you.
Yeah. And there's a couple of other physicians that are in. I don't know if they want to take the floor to,
Dr. Kelly, I think Renee Slade, she has had her hand raised for a bit. I believe she's one of our physicians.
Hi, I'm Renee Slade, and I'm a pediatrician at Rush. And I also have a 5th grader at Whittier and an 8th grader at Brooks. And I was also a volunteer on the advisory panel for allergies. So I have many different hats that I bring into this. I do want to echo what Mary just said, Dr. Barsanti just said, that COVID is not going to go away, and we need to plan. We need to have an in-person plan for when we can be in person. And that might not be January. It might not be March. It might be March. But we need to have a plan so that when we can move there, then we're ready. I'm concerned that the half-day plan is for people who have privilege. It's very complicated to try to figure out how to get children back and forth for a half a day, 2 or 3 days a week. So from an equity point of view, that's very concerning to me. I think lunch, as has been stated, is a complicated issue, but I think we have some really creative brains here, and we can come up with solutions for lunch. And the childcare piece is another piece that I think is really important that we work with our community partners to solve before we announce to the community, or as we're announcing to the community what the options are. Because I mean, that's part of the equity. If we take away the school building from the childcare partner, but then the children still have to go somewhere, even if they go to hybrid school, then 2 or 3 days a week, they still have to go to childcare. So those are some of my main concerns. And again, COVID is going to be around for a while. The vaccine will be available to adults before it will be available to kids. So the teachers will be able to be vaccinated before the students will be able to.
Thank you. I think Stacy had a similar concern about the logistics and equity issue around transportation, et cetera. I think with that, and Mary Beth, I see your comment. I think it is a good point for us to transition to the breakout groups. We have, again, we have 6 breakout group discussions: social emotional learning and support, the learning models for elementary schools and considerations, the learning models for middle schools, family support, so childcare, meals, transportation, safety, medical and health, and community and parent engagement. Again, if you have not picked a group, please rename yourself and your profile so we can get you assigned to the group, so you can begin to wrestle with some of the questions and some of the concerns that we heard here tonight. And then next slide, I have some facilitation notes. Going back to our norms, hopefully your groups will be small enough that you will have equity of voice and allowing people to be heard, and allow people to speak their truth. I would love it if someone takes on the role of note taker and timekeeper, because I don't think I can be in every breakout room. We are going to spend 30 minutes in our breakout sessions, and would love for your group to have a speaker to share out whole group with suggestions and recommendations. When we come back together, we are going to back to the norm of brevity, allow you 3 to 5 minutes to get through your sharing. And I have posed a few guiding questions on the next slide. So we will leave this slide up. I think we can do that, right, Amanda? When folks go into their breakouts?
No,
No, we cannot.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Amanda, Amanda is going to have to put it in the
chat box.
chat.
In the chat.
Yep.
I'll do that.
And or smart people take a photo of it is what I do in other meetings that I'm in. Take a photo of these guiding questions, particularly if you're the facilitator. If in our previous 30 minutes, we had a request for the breakout groups again. If you have your agenda up, they are in numerical order, starting with number 1, social emotional learning and development, to number 6, which is community and parent engagement.
And there should have been an email to everyone with, so some of
A
you may
survey.
have selected it prior
Yeah,
to.
if you've already selected, you have already been assigned to a group.
Right.
Most of you got your, I know I asked you to rank your first 2. There were a couple of you that I gave you your second choice, but for most of you, it would be your top choice. So all of our principals will be in there, like elementary, middle. But Carrie has that list, so she's going to help us get everyone into the right space.
Can you put the questions up again? I'm sorry. I just want to take a picture. Thank you.
So things I want you to all to wrestle with. What questions remain for your group? What were the major concerns for your particular group? There's likely going to be overlap between some of the comments because the logistics, the safety will overlap into some of these other considerations. What do you think the district should reconsider? And we've heard several suggestions today and want you all to dig into that. And then what are the possibilities? We've also heard some possibilities and how can we operationalize some of those possibilities within the guidelines that we're required to follow. And then lastly, going back to our first objective is how can each of us or our collective group or the district solicit additional input and insight from our broader community, including teachers, parents, students, and other community organizations.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? These guiding questions are for our topic, correct?
Yes.
Not the whole plan. So
That's
if I'm
correct.
in safety medical, I'm just really focusing on what are the questions for this topic? What should the
correct.
district reconsider for this topic?
Mhm.
Okay.
And I would say, even hearing some of the recommendations, there's obviously going to be crossover, right? So from a safety, health, and medical perspective, as we're wrestling with this idea of lunch, are there ways that we've not considered that group might have insight into?
Yeah.
As a thought.
Yeah, and when we were doing the kind of planning, there was also, this is an idea, I mean, this is a time for best practices, right? I feel like we got a lot of comments about, well, this district is doing this and this is what they're doing. So this is an opportunity to say, like, here's what I've been hearing and this has seemed to be successful. We can always dig into it later, but if there are any best practices or things that you want to share around the topic areas, you could do that as well.
Right. We're open to some innovative ideas or stealing some innovative ideas that may be out there if we can operationalize those within our budget constraints and within our other policy constraints. And with that, are we ready, Carrie and Amanda, for breakouts?
Yes, the rooms are ready. If there is there's a couple people who just kind of went back off and went back on. So just, take a breath, you'll get in a room. And if there's an issue, you can just send me a private chat and I will work to fix it if there's any issue. So I'm going to open the rooms now.
Now, is Sylvia back?
Yep, I am here.
All right, we're all back, Sylvia, if you want to take it.
I'm ready. So I had the opportunity to join group 5. I wish I could have listened to all of the conversations, but we are going to take the next 20 minutes to hear from each group. I will say that my group posed a lot of questions and also had some great possibilities and solutions. So I'm excited to hear what other groups came up with. So I would love to start with group number 1, which was the social and emotional learning group. Do we have a speaker from that group?
Yes, we do. Sheila Carter, interim principal at Lincoln School. All right, so it's right off the bat, the hybrid model. We had 4 in the group, 4 people. The idea of getting a different teacher, you build relationships. They're like family right now. And so when you take that away and give them a different teacher, it's hard on the students, hard on the teachers, and just hard on the families in general. The hybrid model, someone said it feels cold and impersonal. You can't hug them. You can't console the children. You can't stay 6 feet away. Oh my gosh, that's so hard if you connect with children, so hard. Families build rapport with the teacher, and to have a different teacher, maybe even a teacher from a different school, very hard on the family. Someone mentioned concerned about the social emotional change, that it would be better to stick with one plan and ride it through the year. To bring on site, someone mentioned that they have this idea that being on site is better, but it's not necessarily better for all students. It's not easy. It's not going to be an easy decision. But we heard about one school district that made it happen. Hybrid, and they're doing remote, and no child removed from their class, same teacher. So we want to find out more about that. That's it. Yeah, that's all we have so far.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Group number 2, learning models for the elementary school.
Yeah, that'll be me, Michael Arnsdorf, Senior Director of Technology. So felt that we try to get through everything, but there's a lot of conversation around question 1, and then kind of getting into, like, we started trying to problem solve things or share different things of what we've gone through. But good conversations, agreed, like things that came up was having some, talked a little bit around different models and what were big roadblocks or things that led us to the current hybrid plan, whether it was an AM/PM model or other models that came. So having some transparency around that and what those different models look like. So that was some conversations, had some examples from other districts or kids so we had staff that have kids in other districts and how they've been able to manage and what their models look like. So again, kind of measuring those up with where we're at in the current plan. And I think with that kind of model of what are those different things, what are those, and we talked about trade-offs. So financially, so if an AM/PM model, what does that require us for the number of custodial staff and the amount of time that's needed? And so we shared a little about the demo that was run through at Man School, actually, to be able to get that done. So that was talked about. Talked about how just trying to, well, let me think about time of the day to clean. All plans are sacrificing some instructional time for kids rather than, well, again, it talked about when we're remote, it's mirroring as much as we can of a regular day, but going to a different hybrid plan definitely cuts that back. Then we got into 2 and some of the things that were really focused on consistency for kids, focusing on how much instructional time and maximizing that the alternating Friday was tough. And same thing that Sheila said, that regardless of either model, people want to have their teachers stay consistent and have that. And then we started to talk a little bit about some solutions or problem solving of focusing on, is it the K2 students? And we focus and figure out ways to bring on different groups rather than everybody in the district. So that was some of the different planning through. And then even some examples of our current model with the stage 2, that some of our EC and special ed students that were invited to come on was a pretty small number of the overall population that actually are coming on site. Anybody group 2, please feel free add if I did not do that justice. Again, very passionate people, all great. Thank you again. And we tried to get through all 4, but couldn't get them all. So
I would love to hear about some of the possibilities proposed when when you share those written notes that you're reading from. All right, group number 3, learning models for middle schools. What ideas, additional questions, and possibilities did you discuss?
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Audrey Williams-Lee. I'm the PTO Council co-president, and I have a 7th grader at Julian. And our discussion, even before we answer the first question, April proposed a very good question that got us talking around the goals and intent of doing a hybrid model. So is it primarily academic or is it social emotional, particularly when you're speaking about the middle school students? And so that led us to a conversation of really thinking about the plan and where there are opportunities to be more transparent and to be more educational. We've talked about some of the trade-offs that you're making, and Ebony shared things like, for example, because of the cohort, and depending on how kids need to be together for safety COVID purposes, but instructionally they may be pulled out for accelerated math, or they may be pulled out if they're an IEP. And so how do you actually make that work? And so there's an opportunity that we saw to really share the trade-offs and share the compromises in order to make this plan work, in order to have this hybrid option, and to also help educate parents around that. And so we did speak a bit about that. Again, talked about the piece of being clear about the goals, and then how do we also engage more of the community to validate what we're thinking and to make sure that we are on the right track. But definitely, I think the communication piece and the understanding could help answer a lot of the questions, because I'd say even through our conversation that we've had so far, it's been helpful to actually clarify some things that people may make assumptions about, but not really understanding the why behind it. And so, team, I did not bring the notes. So did anybody have anything else to add from group 3?
I think you captured it well.
Okay, thanks, Ebony.
Sure.
Thank you. So I'm hearing that it was helpful to hear some of the why behind the decisions, and that more transparency shared could be helpful.
Yeah, it could be helpful, and it could provide clarity.
Yeah.
Because I think there's some things you will see something you don't like and make an assumption about why it's being done that way. Or even I've seen a lot of comparison to other districts, and I don't know what their situations are with their teachers, or who's coming back, or how many, or what all that means, or how they're structured versus how we're structured. So I'm not sure how much of that is apples to apples, or makes sense for us to do.
Great. Group number 4, family support, thinking about childcare and families who need additional support with regard to transportation or meal deliveries or childcare.
Yes, that would be me. Hi, everyone. So in our group, we had our childcare partners that were there, and also from By Discovery, Hepzibah, and also the Park District. Thank you, ladies, for being here this evening. And also Faith Cole, our Senior Director of, oh no, I'm sorry. I just gave you a promotion, Faith.
I was like, I will gladly take it.
Soon to be Dr. Cole. Yes, in terms of the major concerns that remain for the group, and we primarily talked about childcare, but it did feed into meals and transportation. Basically, it boiled down to space and schedule. In terms of space, and we raised just a lot of questions. Some of the questions raised for space, is there another option for space for the childcare providers? Would there be extra space for, and I also shared my notes with you, Sylvia, would there be extra space for students in one of the cohorts when they are remote only and for their full day care? Would there be room in the district for By Discovery to have space in the school? And we raised that question because currently the district only has an agreement with Hepzibah. So if students are back on site, it would just be the Park District has real estate outside of the district. Hepzibah obviously has the agreement with the district, but By Discovery would also need space. In the final question, is there capacity in a district to offer a site so that childcare partners can provide program to students whose parents opt for full remote. In terms of the schedule posing an issue, the questions raised were things like, what we need to cohort students. For students who are staying after school with Hepzibah, they would be in mixed cohorts after school, but these cohorts would not be changing on a daily basis. Other questions for families who work, if the schedule were different, parents might be more likely to choose the hybrid. The midday transportation has come up as an issue if we maintain the half-day schedule. Also, the issue of needing to have lunchroom supervision aides. In terms of like what we should reconsider, again, space and the schedule. And the question 3, in terms of possibilities, the 2 suggestions were perhaps for the district to survey families to find out, like, do they really want, like what's the demand for families that want like an in-person versus the families that want a remote. And then the second question that came up in terms of the possibilities is the childcare providers are all providing like lunch during the day. So they have models that we could, even though, some of the situations are very different, they do have models that we could look at and see how they are doing that. Did I miss anything, Faith or Maureen or Mary Beth or Stacy? Great.
Thank you. Group number 5, which was safety and medical and health.
I'm happy to give a quick synopsis, but obviously those with the MDs and the PhDs behind their names, feel free to jump in at any time. I think one of the biggest things was the points that were made were that that the district and the board should be prepared for this to be a long-term situation. I think it's been framed currently like, let's get through the year. And the sense is that this is the long tail of this is going to be much longer. So the planning process for it needs to be longer. The need for a comprehensive survey to kind of figure out what the safety needs are, and that the survey is very, very detailed around like transportation and all of these other factors. There was an epidemiologist who talked about, and I'm probably botching this, but like, had questions or concerns about the thresholds that we were using to determine whether to come back to school. There were questions about like PPE and kind of what safety mechanisms are in place. There was a discussion of, saliva testing. Is that something that the district would be interested in doing? And I'm going to stop there because I recorded the session, so we have all of it there. But if any of the members from that, from 5 want to share more, it was a very good conversation, but it really was focused primarily on the first question, the first bullet.
Yeah, I heard just questions that one of the nurses chimed in on, and I think there are details behind some of the questions that, similar to other groups, more transparency would be helpful. So how would contact tracing be conducted? Do we have a definition for a close contact? What would that process be? How would students be identified? The PPE question, teacher isolation, what is the plan for getting kids in buildings on time, safely, while social distancing? So things that there are probably plans in place, but we may need to be more clear about how these things will be done to give that assurance to the community. All right, we are almost back on schedule, so thank you. Last group, number 6, community and parent engagement group.
I will go ahead and speak for our small but mighty group. I think for me, there were a couple of big things that emerged from our discussion. One of which I think has been kind of touched on, which is sort of the need to survey our community regarding, I think just very simply having the information of who would be coming back and who would not. You know, when we did that remote learning, like the preference form a couple weeks ago, we had to shut that down. So I know what 1,100 students would be doing, but that's it. So we talked about that. We talked about just, again, the need for some transparency around this planning. And then also, I think one of the things I heard was just making sure, because there's so much information that's going out right now, really trying to break it down for parents so that it's a little bit more digestible and that they kind of have the big points at the top of the email, and then they can kind of dig in. I don't know if Jung or Waylon or Lisa want to add anything.
All right, thank you.
Sylvia, can I say one thing? I feel like I should have said something before. One of the a really good point around norming for the safety group, which I think is really important, is that we have so many experts in the community, but the staff that are in the schools have a lot of expertise about how that stuff is working in a school setting, right? So they're in the schools, they know kind of things that people who might be experts don't know, and that it's important to kind of blend those two perspectives of someone knowing the kids, the buildings, and those kinds of things. And so how do we kind of merge those two perspectives? So I felt that was a really good point that one of the participants made.
Great, thank you. So we are in our last 10 minutes, and from our agenda, we're going to just think about our next steps, revisit our commitments, and then conclude. So in terms of next steps, I definitely want to hear from you all. What actions does this group need to take between today and our next meeting? And if you think back to our objectives, we were really focused on two big things today, which was getting more input and figuring out what adjustments or refinements need to happen with the plan. So thinking about those, what are our next steps and what actions do we need to take between now and our next meeting? So I'm saying, how do we get students at the table? The other thing that was noted is the survey. And I know that the district has a draft survey ready to go, and we will certainly revisit that and bring it back to discuss with the panel about when, where, and how to launch that.
Can I add in another thought as well? I think what would be helpful, I think for me anyway, is kind of to understand the expectation around sharing things out. So like as we're kind of discussing things, is there any sense that those things should be held close to the vest? Are there things that we speak about here that can be shared out as people have questions or thoughts? And additionally, like how are we going to communicate out the work that's happening within this space? Is it every time that we meet something will go out? Will it be that, every, couple of weeks we'll kind of give an update? Just curious kind of where that, because I think communication is going to be incredibly important at this point. So just want to make sure that we kind of set guidelines for both of those things.
I could speak to that, Faith. I think, well, one, in terms of the communication out of this group, I think, yes, putting out, making that information transparent. For me, I'm aiming for the day after that meeting. So like tomorrow, posting something with the recording of this meeting, or at least like the big group, because it doesn't record all of the breakouts. And then also sort of like the key takeaways and then some of our next steps. And then just keeping that timeline there too, so people have that accessible. So that will definitely be something that I'm working on. In terms of things that are being shared out, I think I would ideally, like, I know we talked a little bit yesterday about maybe creating some talking points, but also like, you know, we have a lot of like individuals here, right? And I know there are people that are active on social media and things like that. I think like we want to preserve the integrity of the space and make sure that people feel comfortable sharing and that nothing is shared prematurely or out of context. So I hope, you know, that we can kind of trust everyone to just honor that and kind of just think about that as they're, you know, conversing online. But you know, we will be making the recording transparent. So, you know, like it will be out in the open for people to watch and react to. I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts or with regards to that, but sorry, I'm like also looking at the chat. And then, yeah, the survey, that's also, we do have a draft. So yeah, well, I'll take a look at the chat after this and we'll, you know, we've been kind of revising based on the feedback we've been receiving over the past week or so. So
I'm also seeing in the chat that we need to compile the main safety concerns so that those can be clarified. You had asked about communication from our meeting schedule. We also planned for an update to the board on November 10th. So in addition to these recordings being made available, we will have a midpoint check-in with the board to share the progress that the group has made. There was a question about whether breakout groups need to meet in between sessions in order to push their ideas and questions forward. And I would certainly want to open that up into, we're on a very tight timeline of weekly meetings, and does it make sense to use the time during these meetings for the breakout groups to dig in? Or, you know, not sure if people have more time to commit. I'm seeing some heads nodding and moving, so would love to hear the thoughts of the group.
I will just unpack my thinking. I did not intend, because I know that this is a very, very busy group. And I also know as we approach November that, well, you know, it is November with COVID, but typically as we approach that, people become, you know, more busy. So I had not intended to have people meet because our meetings are pretty much every 7 days or so in between. Now, there may be work, you know, that individuals might, you know, like preparation for a meeting. You may need to read some things, but I had not intended for groups to have to come back together. But I would also be happy to hear from this group if you felt like that's necessary.
Dr. Kelly, I would say I agree with your assessment. Coming back together in between would be very difficult for some people, myself included.
Great.
So with just 4 minutes left, I'm sorry to push this along. This is the East Coast and Carol that's coming out. What I'm hearing in terms of the next step is Amanda's going to share with the panel some key talking points that Amanda is going to make sure by what date, Amanda, that this recording would be available. Are you thinking that it might go into the my D97 weekly wrap up?
Tomorrow.
Okay,
so tomorrow.
Yep. All right, and then our next meeting is November 5th. There's a core team. We're going to be debriefing this meeting and planning our agenda. So I will be including that agenda on your calendar invite as soon as I firm up the date with Sylvia as to when, and Kisa as to when our debrief is. Is there any information that would be helpful to you that was not shared in tonight's calendar invite, just for background information? You can put that in the chat.
It looks like based on some of the conversations, it sounds like some groups might want to do some research on best practices or things that they have learned in surrounding districts or things like that. And I have certainly been looking at resources as well. So as you think about possibilities and best practices that you think this group has not considered, certainly Dr. Ebony can help us understand all the things that have gone into this decision, but and help unpack the thinking. But if there are ideas out there that should be considered, definitely bring those back to your group for next week.
Would it be okay if we did send out that draft survey for, because it looks like people are giving some suggestions just so for the group to be able, and that could maybe be something on our agenda for next time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the survey as well as best practices would be a good use of our time at the next meeting to allow people to give feedback and to hear some, yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things I'm just reading, it looks like, and Ebony, I don't know if you want to, given the trade-offs, there's a need to understand the priorities that will drive the planning.
Yeah, so given that we're making choices, I think we need to arrive at kind of what that best worst choice is, and as a community kind of either make a decision and kind of get behind that, because that way I think will undergird the planning. So in those spaces where we have those tough compromises that we need to make, just understanding those to inform the plan.
If I could ask Dr. Kelly, as we're looking at what other districts are doing, I love benchmarking. I do it a lot, but I want to make sure that it's valid for us. Could we understand their constraints versus our constraints and what's similar and what's different? Because it's always good to learn from others and understand what's applicable and what's not. So I would love to understand if we can get benchmarking, not just what they did, but what trade-offs that they have to make in order to actually do it.
All right, I know that we have that benchmarking document, Michael, correct, and Jim. So we could provide that to the panel. We could provide the draft survey to the panel. And then, that could be perhaps on the agendas to talk about. Because sometimes it's easier to talk through it than, you understanding like what's on the piece of paper.
Yep. Great.
All
right, friends. It is 8:01. I thank you so much for your time and attention tonight and look forward to our next meeting. Does anyone have anything for the good of the order? Or Dr. Kelly, do you want to close us out?
I will definitely close out. Thank you. This meeting was far exceeded my expectation. So thank you for being fully committed and also for being fully engaged. And I look forward to seeing everyone next Thursday, November 5th. And take care of yourself on November 4th, no matter, just take care of yourself. Sylvia, if you have a few moments afterwards, Amanda and Kisa, I just want to grab your calendars.
Amanda, do you want to advance the slides so they have the next meeting dates on their calendars? Thank you.
All right, guys. Good night.